"You've got 30 seconds to impress me, or you're done," Dexter Wright said, standing in front of his son, hands clasped behind his back, eyes cold as ice. "And this time, I'm not cleaning up your mess." The sharp clang echoed through, his skull still throbbing from last night's party. His clothes reeked of smoke, whiskey and sweat, his vision blurred, not just from the hangover, but from the rage boiling in his chest. He wasn't a criminal, he was just a rich kid who made a mistake again. But this time, his father had made good on his threat. No more lawyers, no more cover-ups, just concrete walls, metal bars, and a future he didn't recognize. "Get up, Wright. Daddy's here," the officer muttered, unlocking the cell. John's heart froze. His old man never came in person. Outside, standing under the flickering fluorescent light of the precinct hallway, was Dexter Wright. Sharp suit, expression carved from granite, and disappointment radiating off him like heat. John straightened up instinctively, like a soldier. "Before a general, you spent the night with thieves, drug addicts, and a guy who thinks he's a lizard," Dexter said. "Tell me, John, is this how a Wright should be remembered?" John's mouth moved, but no words came. What was there to say? Sorry? Again? Dexter stepped closer. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time. I'm done cleaning up. Your mess? You have two choices. Stay in that cell or accept my solution, and I promise you're not going to like it." John scoffed, trying to regain some control. "What, rehab, military school? Please, Dad, we've done this dance before." A rare, cruel smirk twisted Dexter's lips. "No, son, this time you're getting married." John blinked, confused. "What? You'll marry someone I choose, someone who'll teach you discipline, respect, and humility, someone who's survived more in a week than you have in your life." The silence between them thickened. A marriage? This had to be a joke. John laughed, but Dexter didn't. "Wait, you're serious?" Dexter nodded once. "Her name is Debbie Morgan. She's unconventional, but she agreed to help fix you. You'll live together, study together, work together. You break the rules, she leaves, and so does everything else. Your allowance, your trust fund, your cars, all gone." John's blood ran cold. "Why would anyone agree to that?" "She has her reasons," Dexter said. "And frankly, you don't get a say anymore." The car ride home was silent. John sat stiffly beside his father, the city lights casting fleeting shadows on his face. He wasn't sure what burned more, his father's betrayal or the humiliation of being handed off like a spoiled brat in need of taming. The mansion looked the same, grand, perfect, cold. But something was different inside. Standing at the foot of the staircase was a girl. Not beautiful in the traditional sense, but magnetic, dark eyes like storms, a scar on her cheek, hands clasped tightly in front of her as if holding herself together. She looked like she didn't belong in a place like this, and maybe that's why she did. "John," Dexter said, voice steel, "meet your future wife." The girl lifted her chin. "Nice to meet you, golden boy. I'm Debbie Morgan. Don't bother liking me. I'm not here to be liked." John opened his mouth, but no sound came. He had a bad feeling this wasn't just a punishment. This was a war. And somehow, he already knew he was going to lose. John stared at Debbie, trying to decode what kind of twisted joke his father had orchestrated. She didn't look intimidated. In fact, she looked bored, as if this rich kid melodrama was beneath her. The silence was suffocating until Debbie tilted her head and smirked faintly, like she knew exactly what he was thinking. "You're not what I expected," John said, finally breaking the silence. "Neither are you," she replied dryly. "I imagined someone taller and less punchable," John scoffed. "You know this is insane, right? This whole thing, whatever this is, it's a joke." Debbie stepped closer, her eyes locked onto his. "Your dad made me a deal. I'm holding Up my end. You don't have to like it, you just have to play along. He turned to his father, still standing like a statue. You can't be serious, Dad. She's some... what? Social experiment? A project? She's your last chance, Dexter replied coldly. You've wasted every opportunity I've given you. Debbie is here to straighten you out. If you fail again, I won't be there to catch you. John shook his head, laughter bubbling up, not from humor but disbelief. So, what? You just found her on the street? Gave her a makeover and dropped her in my life like a bomb? Debbie's voice cut through him like a blade. I wasn't on the street. I chose to be away from people like you. For the first time, John really looked at her. She had scars, not just on her skin, but in her eyes, deep ones. And they didn't beg for sympathy. They warned you not to ask. Your room's down the hall, Dexter said to Debbie. You start classes tomorrow, John. You're going with her. Like hell I am. You are, Dexter snapped. If you don't, the car, the account, everything disappears by sunrise. After his father left, John sat on the edge of the grand staircase, gripping his head with both hands. Debbie stood across from him, arms folded. You really hate me already, huh? He muttered. I don't hate you, she said, her voice unexpectedly calm. I just don't believe in you. John flinched, not because she was wrong, but because it hit too close, and he didn't know why that mattered. That night, sleep avoided him. His old life was slipping away like sand through his fingers, replaced by this twisted setup he couldn't begin to comprehend. When morning came, he found Debbie already dressed, bag in hand, waiting at the front door. You ready, golden boy? He wanted to say something smart, something cruel, but all that came out was, yeah. At campus, people stared. John Wright was famous for skipping classes and throwing parties that made the news. Now he was walking beside a girl no one recognized, and she didn't look like she belonged. She didn't care. While professors welcomed her, eyes curious and cautious, Debbie answered questions with confidence. She was sharp, quick, smarter than him in every subject they shared, and that annoyed him more than he expected. At lunch, she sat alone. He saw her by the window, reading. No phone, no distractions, just the silence she seemed to prefer. That night, John found her in the kitchen cooking instant noodles. You know the staff can do that. I know, but I'm used to doing things myself. He leaned on the counter. So, what's your story? Why this? Why me? Debbie didn't look up. You're not the first person who asked me to save them, but you might be the first who doesn't even want to be saved. Before he could respond, she dropped the bomb. If you're serious about wanting your life back, prove it. We'll make a deal. 1 month. You follow my rules. No lies, no tantrums. In return, I help you figure out what you're supposed to. And be, or you can keep spiraling. John hesitated, then extended his hand slowly. Deal! Debbie shook it, firm and unflinching. Then starting tomorrow, golden boy, the war is on. Morning hit John like a slap. Sunlight pouring through the oversized windows, birds chirping too cheerfully, and the scent of coffee that he hadn't made. When he wandered into the kitchen, still groggy and shirtless, Debbie was already there, seated at the marble island, flipping through a textbook. Good, you're up, she said without looking at him. Put on a shirt. We're leaving in 20. John rubbed his eyes. You're kidding. I haven't even had coffee. You've had years of coffee and 0 results. I think we'd try something else. He opened the fridge. Everything inside was organic, labeled perfect, his life in a bottle, but for the first time it all felt artificial. You always like giving orders? He asked, grabbing a bottle of water. No, I just got tired of waiting for people to fix themselves. She finally looked up. Her gaze was steady, unflinching. Today, we're starting phase 1. Phase 1 of what? Deprogramming you. He laughed, but her expression didn't change. She was serious. and something about that made him nervous. They arrived on campus earlier than usual. Debbie had arranged for them to attend back-to-back lectures, which she insisted John sit through without sleeping, texting, or acting like a mannequin. By noon, he was twitching in his seat. "I don't know how you do this," he whispered. She didn't look at him. "Focus is a muscle. Yours is weak." After class, they sat under a tree near the science building. John took out his phone, but Debbie snatched it mid-scroll. "Hey, no distractions, that's rule 1. Give it back. You want your life back, right? Then live it, be here, be present, not trapped in pixels." He stared at her, considering his options. Then, against every instinct, he let it go. She smiled faintly, almost like approval. Later, back home, Debbie made tea while John slumped on the couch. "This is exhausting," he muttered. "No, John, this is normal. You've just never lived it." Her tone wasn't cruel. It was matter of fact, and that made it sting more. He watched her move around the kitchen, confident, precise. She knew what she was doing. "You said you've done this before," he said. "Saving people." Her hand froze over the kettle. "Yeah, once." There was something brittle in her voice now, something cracked beneath the surface. "What happened?" "He died," she replied simply. "OD, I was too late." John swallowed, guilt curling in his gut. "I'm sorry." She shrugged. "He made his choice. Now you get to make yours." That night, John couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words. Who was this girl who talked like a soldier and lived like a monk? And why was she so willing to burn herself out on someone like him? In the morning, she was waiting again. Coffee, a tight schedule, a new stack of books. "This your idea of romance?" he joked. Debbie snorted. "This is rehab, golden boy. You're lucky I haven't made you scrub floors." They walked to class together, and for the first time he noticed how people looked at them, not with mockery, but curiosity. Like something about Debbie's presence changed him, softened his edges. After lunch, she led him into a side building he hadn't been to before. Inside was a driving simulator, top-tier, advanced, the kind used by pros. "Time to see what you're really good at," she said, sliding into the second seat. He raised an eyebrow. "You race? Better than you ever will." He laughed. "You're serious." "I never joke about machines." She tossed him the keys. "Beat my time. If you do, I'll drop one rule. If you don't, you owe me your full trust." "You're insane." "Drive." John gripped the wheel. As the simulation started, his heart pounded, not with fear, but anticipation, adrenaline. He hadn't felt it in weeks, maybe even months. He raced hard, fast, reckless, but not enough. Debbie's time stood unbeaten. "You almost had me," she said, stepping out, "but almost doesn't change lives." He stared at her, chest heaving. "What are you?" She smiled. "Just someone who stopped waiting for heroes." John woke up before the alarm. Not because he was rested, but because his mind wouldn't shut off. For the first time in years, he wasn't drowning in noise. He was suffocating in silence. And in that silence, he heard Debbie's words echoing from the day before. "I never joke about machines." At breakfast, she was already in the kitchen, eating toast, earbuds in, scribbling notes in a worn-out notebook. He sat across from her, watching. "Do you ever rest?" he asked. "Rest is for the rich," she replied, eyes still on the page. He chuckled. "You're living in a mansion. I'm still not rich." That answer lingered. Later, during class, John caught himself actually listening, not just hearing the professor drone, but trying to connect the dots. Debbie had this weird gravitational pull. When she paid attention, he did too, like she dared him to match her. After school, they stopped by a bookstore. Debbie lingered near a shelf of philosophy books. John found her thumbing through Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. "You like this stuff?" he asked. "I like truth. This guy knew suffering, didn't waste it." John frowned. Sufferings. Just pain. No, she said softly. It's data. Her eyes drifted distant. And for the first time, he saw it. Not just resilience, but ghosts. She wasn't just tough, she was forged. That night, while Debbie studied, John wandered through the Wright mansion. Every room was perfectly designed but hollow, like stage sets. He ended up in the family library, dusty, unused. A photo caught his eye. It was him, maybe 12, standing next to his mother. She was laughing. He wasn't. Dexter had never liked photos. Suddenly the silence broke. Debbie's voice, behind him. You were cute once. John turned. Sneak much? You left the door open, rookie move. She walked in and studied the photo. She looked kind. She was, John said. She died when I was 15. Cancer. Dad didn't cry. Debbie sat on the edge of the old velvet couch. Maybe. He did. Some people cry on the inside. He scoffed. Not him. He built a business the day after her funeral, said grief was non-profitable. They were quiet for a while. You ever lose anyone? John asked. Her expression darkened, but she nodded once. My brother. He was older. We were in foster care together. John blinked. I didn't know you had a brother. Most people don't. He was a fighter, always stood up for me. One day, he didn't come back. What happened? They said he overdosed. I still don't believe it. Her hands tightened into fists. After that, I ran, lived on the streets, learned fast that trust is currency. And most people are broke. John's throat tightened. How'd you end up in this program? Your dad found me near his office. I was scamming tourists for sandwich money. He offered me something better. Said he needed someone tougher. Than you. John let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. You think I'm a lost cause? He asked. Debbie looked at him then. Really looked. I think you're scared, not broken. There's a difference. The weight of her words settled into his chest. No one had said that to him before. Not like that. Before bed, John knocked on her door. What? She asked through the crack. I want to try. For real this time. She opened it wider. Try what? Whatever this is. Fixing me. Just don't give up yet. Debbie stared at him, then nodded slowly. Tomorrow, she said, we start digging deeper. John returned to his room, heart pounding. Something had shifted. For the first time, he wasn't playing a role. He wanted to earn her trust, not because he had to, but because he needed to. The next morning, Debbie stood in the driveway with the car keys dangling from her fingers. She wasn't smiling. She didn't have to. Her eyes were electric with something close to mischief and war. John stepped out, blinking against the sun. You're up early. I've been up since 5, reading, planning. He rubbed the back of his neck. Planning what? She tossed him the keys. A race. He caught them, startled. A what? You said you were good behind the wheel. Prove it. There's a stretch of open road outside the city. 1 lap? I drive first, then you. John narrowed his eyes. You want to race me? No! I want to beat you. It was the first time he saw her like that, alive with adrenaline, and he hated how much he admired it. 20 minutes later, they were flying down the freeway in a borrowed sports car, wind cutting through the silence. Debbie took the first lap. Her control was surgical. No panic, no wasted motion, just precision and grace through every curve. John gripped the seat harder with every turn. He had driven fast before, drunk, reckless, wild. But this was something else. She was fast because she respected the road. When she stopped, her eyes sparkled with quiet victory. Your turn. He slid into the driver's seat, jaw clenched. He floored it. The engine roared as he pushed past speed limits and expectations. He wanted to impress her, or maybe prove her wrong. But halfway through, his ego took the wheel. He overcorrected. A turn. The car spun, just for a second, but enough to throw off his rhythm. By the time he crossed the line, Debbie was already shaking her head. "You drive like you live," she said. "Fast, loud, and sloppy." He stepped out, teeth gritted. "You think you're better than me?" She tilted her head. "I don't have to think, I already proved it." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right, and that stung more than losing. They drove back in silence, tension thick between them. At home, she disappeared into her room. John paced the hallway. He wasn't used to losing, especially not to someone like her. But underneath the shame, there was something else, curiosity, and maybe respect. That night, he knocked on her door again. "I want a rematch," he said. She leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "Why?" "Because I need to know if it was luck or if you're really that good," she smiled faintly. "You want to win. I want you to understand why you lost." He exhaled. "Then teach me." Her expression changed, less smug, more surprised. She nodded slowly. "Tomorrow, 6 a.m. No excuses." The next morning, Debbie handed him a stack of articles and diagrams. "This is how you start," she said. "You learn like everything else. Fast isn't enough. You need finesse, awareness." He rolled his eyes. "I didn't think I'd need a textbook for driving." "You don't need it for driving," she said. "You need it for growing up." The training began, day after day. Routes, curves, control. They argued, laughed, fought again. But slowly, something shifted in John. He started to care, not about winning, but improving. One afternoon, Debbie sat beside him after a long session. "You're not hopeless," she said. He glanced. "Over." "That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me," she chuckled. "Don't get used to it." But that night, when he returned to his room, John stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Something was changing in his reflection, in his posture, in his eyes. Maybe for the first time in his life, he didn't hate the man looking back. John couldn't sleep. Every night his dreams grew louder, not nightmares, just memories. His mother's laughter, the emptiness after, and now Debbie. Her voice, her sharpness, her refusal to be impressed. She lived in his mind like a riddle with no answer. The next morning, she wasn't in the kitchen, not in the driveway, not in the library. For a moment, panic. Then he saw her outside, sitting barefoot on the lawn, staring at nothing. Her hoodie was pulled over her head, and she looked small. He stepped closer. "You okay?" She didn't turn. "Do you know what today is?" He shook his head. "My brother's birthday." John hesitated. "Want to talk about him?" "No," she said. "But thanks." Silence. A breeze passed between them. "I still have the last thing he gave me," she said. "A keychain. Stupid little plastic. Un car. It's in my drawer." John sat beside her on the grass. "What was he like?" She smiled faintly. "Loud, protective, stubborn. Kind of like you, actually. Only better." He chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." "He used to sneak out at night to get food for us. When we were in that group home, the staff forgot we existed half the time. He made sure we never went hungry." "What happened to him?" "It wasn't your fault." "Doesn't matter. I carry it anyway." She stood, brushing grass from her jeans. "Let's get back to work." That afternoon, John found himself checking her door more than once. He didn't knock, just listened. At dinner they barely spoke. But something hung in the air between them. Shared grief, maybe, or the quiet birth of trust. Later, alone in the study, John opened his laptop and started searching. Debbie Morgan. Nothing came up. No records, no history. As if she'd never existed before the day his father brought her home. And that scared him. The next day, he followed her discreetly after class. Not to spy, not really. Just to understand. She walked to an old building near the edge of campus, abandoned, graffiti-stained. She slipped inside. He waited 5 minutes before going in. The inside was empty, broken windows, dust. Then he heard her voice. "Following people's not a good look, golden boy." He froze. She stepped out from the shadows, arms crossed. "You're not subtle. I just wanted to know where you go, why you come here." She stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, she walked past him and sat on the floor near a crumbling wall. "I used to sleep here, before your dad found me." John swallowed hard. "Jesus." "It's not a sob story," she said. "It's just a fact." He knelt beside her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to look at me like you're looking now." He didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. He just stayed there beside her as the light filtered through cracked glass. That night, Debbie didn't close her door. It stayed half open. John passed by and stopped. He almost entered, then thought better of it. "Good night, Debbie," he whispered. From inside, her voice came, soft. "Good night, John." He walked to his room, chest heavy, not with confusion, but something else, something dangerous. He was starting to care. It was a Friday when John first noticed the whispers. Not that he hadn't heard them before. He was, after all, a Wright. His last name alone invited curiosity, envy, and quiet commentary. But this time was different. The whispers weren't about him, they were about her. "Is that the girl living with him? I heard she used to sleep in train stations. She doesn't even look like she belongs here." At first, John shrugged it off. People always talked, but by the end of the day it was harder to ignore. Debbie's presence beside him had become a lightning rod. She wore it with quiet defiance, never looking directly at the people whispering. Her expression remained unreadable, cold, composed, distant. They were walking through the central courtyard after a lecture when a group of girls passed by, pretending not to look while clearly listening. "She's his project," one of them murmured, "like a rescue dog." Debbie didn't break stride. John stopped. "They shouldn't say that," he said, voice tight. "Let them," she replied, not even glancing back. "They think silence is power, but it's just cowardice dressed in perfume." They kept walking, but the words clung to him like smoke. That night, John sat in the Wright Library, thumbing through an old yearbook, looking at photos of himself, surrounded by people who were no longer around, people who had loved the parties, the status, the money, but never really him. Debbie found him there, quiet as a shadow. "You okay?" she asked. He didn't look up. "I think I've lived most of my life being liked for all the wrong reasons." "Yeah," she said, "I know that tune." He finally met her gaze. "But they never hated me. Not like this." She shrugged. "That's because they fear what they don't understand. I don't fit the narrative. Poor girl from nowhere, suddenly in the mansion of the elite. Makes people nervous." He closed the book. "Does it bother you?" "Of course it does," she said, "but I've lived through worse than whispers." There was a long pause. "What's the worst thing anyone's ever said to you?" John asked. Debbie leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling like it held memories. "That I was just a temporary problem," she said softly. "A social inconvenience they could lock away, forget about until I aged out of the system." John's stomach twisted. "Who said that?" "A caseworker, when I was 14. I never forgot it." The silence between them wasn't empty. It was charged with history, grief, and something unspoken growing slowly between them. The following week, the whispers grew louder. John overheard a conversation between two professors outside the economics building. "I'm not sure I'm comfortable with Wright's son bringing her into our academic programs. She's qualified, passed all entrance exams, Yes, but her background. John stepped into their line of sight. Her background what? The professors turned red-faced and stammered apologies, but the damage was done. It wasn't about her ability, it was about her existence. That night, John barged into his father's study. "You set her up," he said. Dexter looked up from his glass of scotch. "Excuse me?" "You knew this would happen, the scrutiny, the backlash. You put her in this position to shock me." "I gave her an opportunity," Dexter replied coolly. "She accepted it. If you can't handle the social repercussions of growing up, that's your problem. You don't care about her. I care about you. She's a catalyst, nothing more." John's fists clenched. "She's not a pawn, Dad. She's a new person." Dexter raised an eyebrow. "And yet you've only just realized that." John stormed out. Later, he found Debbie outside on the back patio, barefoot on the cold stone tiles, staring up at the sky. "Did you know he was using you?" John asked quietly. She didn't turn. "Of course I did. That's what rich men do. They offer broken things to fix other broken things." "You're not broken?" She looked at him then, eyes darker than usual. "Maybe, but I'm still a tool in his game. And you're starting to care." He stepped closer. "Is that so bad?" Debbie smiled sadly. "Only if you think I'll still be here when the game ends." He wanted to reach for her, to say something that would stop the distance from growing. But nothing came. Just silence. Again. As he walked away, a single thought burned in his mind. He wasn't ready to lose her. Not now. Not after everything. John didn't sleep well. Ever since that night on the patio, a new kind of restlessness had taken hold. Not the old, reckless kind that came from guilt or hangovers, but something deeper. He didn't just think about Debbie. He worried about her, not because she was fragile. She wasn't, but because there was something inside her that stayed too quiet for too long. The next morning, the house felt different, colder. Debbie wasn't in the kitchen, or the library, or her room. Her door was shut. John knocked once. No answer. Then again. "Debbie," he called. Still nothing. When he turned the knob and stepped inside, he found her sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red, though she wasn't crying anymore. "I shouldn't have come here," she said softly. John knelt beside her. "Why are you saying that now?" "Because I forgot," she whispered. "I forgot this wasn't real." He stared at her, heart pounding. "It is real." "No," she said, voice cracking. "Your world, this place, none of it was ever meant for people like me." He reached out, slowly, afraid she might flinch, but she didn't. She leaned slightly into him, the weight of her head brushing against his shoulder. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. "I saw your file," he said gently. "The one my father keeps locked in the basement." She didn't move. "I wasn't looking for it. It just fell out while I was searching for something else. There was nothing bad, just details, a photo, a history, where you'd lived." Debbie exhaled shakily. "So now you know the worst of me." He shook his head. "No. Now I know how much you've survived." They sat there a while longer, not speaking. The sun crept in through the blinds, casting quiet shadows across the room. Later, when she stood and began tidying the room like nothing had happened, John watched her with new eyes. She was like a fortress, solid on the outside, hollowed out inside. "Do you want to go somewhere?" he asked suddenly. She looked up confused. "Where?" "Anywhere, just not here." She hesitated, then nodded. They drove out of the city, no destination in mind. It was the first time John let Debbie take the wheel since their challenge weeks ago. She drove like she lived, with control, grace, and no room for unnecessary detours. Eventually, they reached an old overlook by the cliffs. Wind whipped through their hair as they stood at the edge, watching the waves crash violently below. Debbie crossed her arms. When I was younger, I used to dream about cliffs. Why? I don't know. Maybe because cliffs are honest. One step and everything changes. John looked at her. You don't need to jump to change your life. She smiled faintly. No, but I needed to fall once, and I did, and I survived. He took a step closer. You're not falling anymore, Debbie. She turned to him, the wind pushing strands of hair across her face. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but something else. Trust, maybe. The beginnings of something dangerous and beautiful. I don't know how to let people in, John, she admitted. Every time I have, I lost them. I'm not going anywhere, he said. She didn't reply, but for the first time, she didn't push him away. That night, back at the mansion, Debbie didn't retreat to her room. She stayed in the living room with John, watching old movies in silence. They didn't touch, didn't speak, but something in the quiet flicker of the screen and the warmth of the shared space stitched them closer together than words ever could. And when she finally said goodnight, it wasn't distant. It was soft. Thank you, she whispered. For what? He asked. For showing me the edge and not pushing. John didn't sleep much that night either, but this time it wasn't restlessness. It was hope. John couldn't explain what was happening to him, but he knew it wasn't normal. Every morning, he woke up looking for her, not just physically but emotionally. He measured his day by the way she smiled, if she smiled. Every sarcastic jab felt like a private language. Every shared silence was sacred. But the closer they got, the more it scared him. Debbie was a storm, with a calm center, and he was drifting toward it without an anchor. It started with a phone call. John had just stepped out of class when his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He answered without thinking. John Wright? A voice asked, cool and unfamiliar. Yeah, who's this? My name's Adrian. I used to know Debbie. Thought you should know. She's not who she says she is. The call cut before John could respond. For a second, everything around him blurred. Then, slowly, the world returned to focus, too loud, too sharp. When he got home, Debbie was in the kitchen making tea. She looked peaceful. He didn't want to ruin it, but the voice echoed in his head. Who's Adrian? He asked. She stiffened, spoon frozen mid-stir. Where did you hear that name? He called me, said you weren't who you say you are. She set the spoon down slowly, then turned to face him, her eyes suddenly hollow. He's from the last place I stayed before. Everything. A shelter. He was kind. At first. John stepped closer. What happened? He lied. Took money from other girls, promised help. Never gave it. I confronted him. He tried to shut me up. I left. Why would he call me now? Because I'm not invisible anymore. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. John reached for one. Debbie? I don't want your pity, John. It's not pity, he said. It's something else. She pulled away. Don't say it. Not yet. He didn't push. The next day, whispers returned. But now they weren't just about Debbie's past. They were about John, too. Did you hear? Wright's son and the girl. It's more than just a contract. Maybe she trapped him. Gold digger, street smart. John tried to block it out, but it got harder when Adrian showed up. He found John outside the campus gym, leaning casually against a pillar. You don't know her like I do, Adrian said. John turned, jaw clenched. You don't know her now. She plays broken, but she knows how to survive. She'll use whatever she can. She's good at it. John stepped forward. Get lost. But Adrian didn't budge. She burned bridges before. She'll do it again. You think you're different? That night, John didn't tell Debbie what happened, but something had changed in his eyes, and she noticed. "You're doubting me," she said. "No," he replied too quickly. "Yes, you are." He didn't deny it this time. "I just don't know what to believe anymore. Everyone has secrets." She turned away, "Including you." They stood in the hallway, the silence between them deeper than any fight. Not anger, not hatred, just fracture. Later, she slipped a note under his door. 5 words, written in her small, neat handwriting. "You don't trust me yet." The next morning, she was gone. Not from the house, but from his side. They went to class separately, ate lunch at different tables, walked alone. The silence wasn't sacred anymore, it was a wall. And John realized something terrifying. He missed her, more than he ever thought possible. For the first time since this strange arrangement began, the mansion felt like a prison again. John sat alone at the dining table, untouched food in front of him, staring at the seat Debbie used to fill every morning. She wasn't avoiding the house, but she was avoiding him, carefully, strategically. She spoke only when necessary, and always with distance. He knew why, and he hated himself for it. It wasn't just Adrian, it was the fact that John had let his doubts win, just long enough for Debbie to feel it. Across town, Dexter Wright was in his office, leaning back in his chair as he watched. The security feed from the house. A quiet smirk played on his lips. The distance between John and Debbie was growing, just as he'd predicted. "She's losing grip," he said to his assistant, "and he's starting to remember who he is." But what Dexter didn't see, what no camera could show, was that John wasn't returning to his old self. He was losing everything he'd started to build. Later that week, during a charity gala hosted by the university, John was expected to attend, alone. Debbie declined the invitation before it even reached her hands. "I'm not going to stand in a ballroom filled with people who think I'm an accident," she said flatly. "You think I care about them?" John snapped. "I think you care about your reputation," she answered, not cruelly, but cold enough to sting. So John went, black suit, fake smile, empty glass in hand. Everyone smiled at him. The prodigal son, reformed, handsome, charming. No one asked where Debbie was, except for one person. Clara. She was the daughter of a business associate of Dexter, blonde, poised, elegant. Everything John was expected to want, but never did. "Your father tells me you're doing much better," she said sweetly. He forced a smile. "Sure. I always knew you just needed direction. It's good he finally found you. Help." John's jaw tightened. "Debbie isn't help, she's—" "What? Temporary?" Clara interrupted. "We both know how this ends." He left before dessert. When he got home, the house was dark. He walked past Debbie's room, but her door was open. She wasn't there. He checked the kitchen, the patio, the garden. Nothing. Panic. Then he saw her, at the back edge of the property, near the tree line. Alone. Arms wrapped around herself, shivering in the early night breeze. He approached slowly. "I went to the gala," he said. "I know. I hated every second." She didn't look at him. "You fit there, I don't. You fit here," he said, "with me." Finally she turned. "You don't get to say that. Not when you listen to a stranger instead of me. Not when you let doubt make the choice." "I didn't mean to, but you did, John. That's the point. It wasn't just Adrian. It was all the people. Whispering, all the looks, all the weight of your last name. I never asked to be part of your world, but once I was. I hoped it meant something." He stepped forward. "It does." "Then prove it." Silence, then a whisper. "I don't know how." Her voice cracked. "Then we're both lost." She turned and walked away, back toward the mansion. This time he didn't follow. Inside, John stood in the hallway, staring at a photo on the wall, one of him and his father from years ago, smiling, plastic. He realized in that moment he wasn't afraid of becoming like his father. He was afraid it had already started. The days that followed were cold in every way that mattered. Debbie no longer met John's eyes. She moved through the house like a shadow, silent, efficient, distant. She studied harder, drove alone, cooked her own meals. Not out of spite, but protection. John felt the distance like a wound he couldn't bandage. One evening, as rain tapped gently on the windows, he sat alone in the living room, staring at his phone. He hovered over her number, thumb trembling, but never pressed call. She was just down the hall, but it had never felt so far. That night, Debbie received a letter, a real one, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a short message on plain paper. "You don't belong in that house. Come back to where people know your name. A." The handwriting was unmistakable. Adrian. She didn't tell John. The next day, she left early and didn't come back until late. John waited on the stairs for hours, unsure whether he was guarding her return or his own pride. When she finally stepped inside, soaked from the rain, he stood. "Where were you?" She dropped her keys on the table. "Out." "With Adrian." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you spying on me now?" "No," he said quickly. I'm trying to understand. I don't know how to fix this if I don't know what you need." "What I need," she repeated, laughing bitterly. "What I need is for you to stop trying to rescue me like I'm some fallen thing. I was whole before I got here." John took a breath, trying not to respond with anger. "So why did you come?" She paused. The question landed harder than he expected. "Because I thought your father's offer would give me a future," she said. "But now I see it was just another trap with prettier curtains." John frowned. "What does that mean?" "Your father," she said carefully, "didn't just offer me a clean record and a place to stay. He promised to erase someone else's debt, someone I care about, someone who got caught up in things I couldn't protect them from." "Who?" John asked. She hesitated. "My brother." John blinked. "But you said he's not dead. He's in jail." I lied. The room went quiet. "I needed help. I couldn't pay for a lawyer. Your father offered connections, influence, erasure. In return, I had to play the part. Wife-to-be, reformer, savior of the golden boy." John's voice dropped. "So, all of this was just a deal?" Debbie looked away. "At first." He stepped closer. "And now?" She didn't answer. From behind them, a voice interrupted. Calm, authoritative, cold. "Now, it's finished." They turned. Dexter Wright stood in the doorway, coat dripping, face unreadable. "I think we've all had enough of this farce," he said. "John, pack your bags. We're leaving in the morning. Clara and her father are flying in. It's time you met your real future." John stared at him. "No." Dexter blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no," John repeated. "I'm not marrying Clara. I'm not leaving. And I'm sure as hell not abandoning Debbie." "She lied to you," Dexter said, voice rising. "She used you." "No," John replied. "You used her." Debbie turned away, suddenly unable to stand the tension. But John walked to her, slowly, deliberately, and took her hand. "I don't care why you came here," he said. "I care why you stayed." For the first time in days, she looked into his eyes, and for the first time ever, she didn't look away. Dexter's voice dropped to a growl. "You'll regret this." John didn't flinch. "Maybe, but at least it'll be my mistake." Dexter turned and walked out, the sound of his footsteps fading into the storm outside. Debbie squeezed John's hand just once, then let go. "We're not out of the storm yet," she said. "No," he replied, "but we're finally walking through it together." The storm outside had passed by morning, but inside the Wright mansion the tension was unrelenting. John barely slept. He lay awake, replaying the moment when Debbie revealed her truth. and the expression on his father's face when he challenged him. The house, once his prison, now felt like a battleground. At breakfast, he waited for Debbie in silence. She arrived. Late, her hair damp, wearing the same hoodie she'd slept in. She poured herself coffee without a word. "Did you mean what you said last night?" he asked. She paused, then nodded. "Every word. I'm glad you told me, even if it hurt." Debbie sat across from him, eyes tired. "You deserve honesty, even if it ruins things." John leaned in, elbows on the table. "It didn't ruin anything. It just made this real." That afternoon, John was called into his father's office. Dexter stood behind his desk, 2 suitcases on the floor. "You're going to Boston," he said plainly. "You'll intern at Wright & Co. for 6 months. You'll stay out of trouble, out of the headlines and away from her." John stared at the bags. "You already packed for me?" "Consider it a favor. I know you'd never make the responsible choice on your own." John crossed his arms. "What if I don't go?" Dexter's jaw clenched. "Then I'll make sure Debbie disappears. No money, no protection, no second chance. You'd ruin her life to punish me?" "I'd do anything to fix you." John's fists tightened. "She's not the one who needs fixing anymore. I am." Dexter walked around the desk, standing eye to eye with his son. "You're throwing your future away for someone who manipulated you. She gave up everything for her brother. You call that manipulation. I call it loyalty." Dexter's voice was sharp now. "She lied. And you built this lie," John snapped. "You offered her a life, dangled it like bait, then expected her not to fight for what mattered to her." Silence. Then Dexter stepped back, looked away, and said flatly, "You're no longer my concern." John left the room without another word. When he told Debbie what happened, she didn't look surprised. "I knew he'd cut you off eventually," she said. "That's how men like him work. They control everything, even love." "I don't need anything from him," John said. "I just need to know what you're going to do." She looked down. "I've been offered an apartment, a new name, a way out. Your father arranged it all. It was part of the deal. And now," Debbie's voice was barely above a whisper, "now I don't know what I want." John reached out and took her hand across the table. "Then let's figure it out together." But that night, Debbie didn't stay in the house. She slipped away while he was in the study, left without a sound. Her room was empty, her notebooks gone. Only a note remained, taped to the inside of her door. "I never meant to stay. Thank you for making me wish I could." John sat on her bed, the note in his hands, eyes stinging. He thought he was strong enough to choose her, but he never imagined she'd choose to leave. The next morning, he drove around the city, visited the cliff where she once stood, the bookstore she loved, the quiet corners of the campus where they used to sit. Nothing, no one had seen her. By evening, he returned home empty-handed, hollow. He passed his father in the hallway. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. The silence between them said it all. Dexter had won, but at what cost? Later that night, alone in the garden, John pulled out the small model car keychain Debbie had once shown him, the last thing her brother had given her. He had found it on her nightstand, and now it was all he had left. He closed his hand around it, not as an ending, but as a promise. John didn't wait until morning. The moment he read Debbie's note, something inside him snapped, not in rage, but in purpose. He didn't panic, he didn't cry, he moved. By the time the sun began to rise, John had already made a list, places Debbie had mentioned, people she might still know, anything that might offer a trail. Her past was scattered across shadows, but he would follow them anyway. He started at the shelter downtown. It was where she'd said she met Adrian. The place looked half abandoned, paint peeling, front door locked with rusted chains. But the back entrance was open. Inside, he found a man sweeping. "Hey," John said, "I'm looking for someone, Debbie Morgan." The man looked up slowly, expression unreadable. "She hasn't been here in over a year." "But she might have. Come back. She left a note. She's gone." "Lot of people leave," the man said. "Few come back." John handed him his number. "If you see her or hear anything—" Back in the car, John drove aimlessly for hours. He skipped class, ignored his phone. He returned to the cliff. Nothing. Drove to the bookstore, the library, a coffee shop they'd been to once. Still, nothing. By evening, exhaustion set in, but he couldn't stop. He returned home only to change. Dexter saw him coming in, disheveled, desperate, said nothing. John stared at his father. "This is what you wanted, right?" Dexter didn't look up from his papers. "You'll be better off." John clenched his jaw. "Then why does it feel like I'm dying?" No answer. The next morning, John got a call from a blocked number. A voice, shaky female. She was here at the bus station yesterday, headed east. That was all he needed. He packed a bag, withdrew what money he had left and drove. No security, no assistant, no trust fund. Just determination and the weight of every word he never said. At the third station he checked. A clerk recognized Debbie's photo. "Quiet. A girl," she said. "Bought a ticket to Halewood, a small town 2 hours away." John drove like the road was a countdown. When he arrived, he found the town quiet, sleepy. He asked around. No one had seen her. He almost gave up until he saw it. A diner on the edge of town, small, worn down, but open late. Inside, behind the counter, was Debbie. She was pouring coffee, her hoodie pulled low, hair tied back, but he'd know her from a mile away. John stepped in. The bell over the door rang. She looked up and froze. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time stopped. He didn't move, didn't speak. She slowly stepped out from behind the counter. "I told you not to come after me," she said softly. "I didn't listen," he replied. Debbie's voice trembled. "Why are you here?" "To finish the sentence," he said. "The one I started when I said I didn't know what you meant to me." She didn't speak. Her hands trembled. "You meant everything," John said. "Not because you fixed me, but because you saw me and I saw you too. Not your past, not your scars, you." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't owe me anything." "I'm not here to repay a debt," he said. "I'm here to choose you. Freely. Finally." Debbie took one hesitant step forward. "I thought I had to disappear to protect you." "You were wrong," he said gently. "You were the only thing keeping me from disappearing." She closed. The distance between them, hands trembling as they reached for his. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." "But you came. Always." And in the middle of that small, forgotten diner, the world shrank to two hearts finding each other again. Not with a kiss, not yet, but with silence, the good kind. The next morning in Halewood came with a soft drizzle, the kind that didn't bother you, just reminded you that the world kept moving, whether you were ready or not. John and Debbie sat outside the small diner, sipping coffee from paper cups. No more running, no more hiding, just questions. And for once, answers. "I thought you'd hate me," Debbie said quietly, watching the fog drift across the parking lot. "I did," John replied, "for about 3 minutes." She smiled, sad but genuine. "Why did you really come, John? Was it just guilt?" "No," he said, looking straight at her. "It was grief. Grief. I thought I'd lost you, and it felt like losing a part of myself that I hadn't even figured out yet." Debbie lowered her gaze. "I never wanted you to chase me. I wanted you to be free." "I am," he said, "but freedom doesn't mean running from what matters. It means choosing it." They stayed silent for a while. Finally, Debbie whispered, "And what if I'm not good at being chosen? Then we figure it out together." She blinked fast, biting her lip. I don't have anything left. No degree yet, no job. Just a suitcase and a pair of sneakers with a hole in them. You have me. The words hung in the air, fragile and fearless. She stared at him, and for the first time she didn't look guarded. She looked tired, but peaceful. What about your father? John laughed bitterly. He lost me long before you came into the picture. You just gave me the courage to leave. I don't want you to give up everything. I'm not giving up anything, he said. I'm starting everything. They checked out of the motel around noon. John placed her small suitcase in the back of his car. As they pulled out of Halewood, Debbie leaned her head against the window. Where are we going? She asked. Wherever you want. Home? He glanced at her. Home isn't a place, Debbie. It's you. They stopped at a rest area on the highway, where Debbie used a payphone to make one last call, to the prison, where her brother was being held. Is this Morgan? The voice on the other end asked. Yes. I just wanted to let you know I'm coming back for him. When I'm ready, he won't be forgotten. Back in the car, she looked different, not lighter, but clearer. You don't have to carry all of it alone, John said as they drove. I've never had someone offer to carry anything, she admitted. He reached over, took her hand in his. You do now. When they reached the city limits, Debbie looked around at the skyline. It was the same city that once spit her out. But now it didn't seem so threatening. At a red light, she asked, What happens now? John smiled. We stop being passengers and start driving our own story. She smirked. You know I still drive better than you, right? He laughed. I'll let you have that for now. That evening, back at the mansion, the place felt different. Not warmer, but no longer cold. Debbie paused at the threshold. I can't stay here, she said. I know. I need my own place, my own name, my own choices. I'll help you get it all, John said, but not because I want to save you. Why then? Because I want to be there while you save yourself. She nodded. One condition. What? You're not allowed to leave. He took her hand again. Not in this lifetime. A month had passed since Debbie returned to the city, but nothing was quite the same. She had her own apartment now, a tiny place above a used bookstore with creaky floors and peeling paint. But it was hers, the first place that didn't feel like someone else's cage. She painted one wall blue and hung a photograph of the cliff, where she'd once stood, unsure if she'd ever matter. Now she did. John visited almost every day, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with coffee, sometimes just to sit on the floor and do nothing. They didn't need to talk as much anymore. The silence between them had evolved into comfort. One afternoon, Debbie pulled out the keychain her brother gave her, the plastic car with the chipped paint. She placed it gently in a small glass box on her windowsill. John watched her, arms crossed. Memorial? He asked. Reminder, she said, of where I've been and where I won't go back. I like that. You should try it, she teased. I did, he replied, pulling something from his pocket. A photo, one of him and his mother. He set it beside hers. She was the last person who truly saw me, until you. Debbie didn't reply. She didn't have to. Weeks turned into something softer. They both enrolled in classes again. John switched majors to psychology. So I can understand people instead of just judging them, he'd said. Debbie laughed. Or at least understand me. They still fought, of course, over dishes, schedules, space, but the fights never lingered. They were building something stronger than comfort. They were building truth. One night, sitting on the fire escape outside her apartment, John pulled out a small envelope. What's this? Debbie asked. He handed it to her. Inside was a printed contract, no lawyer names, no legal jargon, just handwritten promises. Rule 1, no running. Rule 2, no pretending. Rule 3, we choose each other every day. She looked at him, You wrote this? He nodded. I don't want a ceremony. I don't want a show. I want this. You, me, every day, as we are. Debbie folded the paper slowly, tears in her eyes. This isn't the kind of proposal most girls dream about. I'm not most guys, she smiled, wiping a tear. Then yes. Let's rewrite the ending. That weekend they drove back to the cliff, not to stand at the edge, but to plant something. A small tree, barely 3 feet tall, roots fresh, fragile, but reaching. Debbie placed the photo of her brother in the soil before they covered it. To new growth, she whispered. John took her hand, and for the first time since they met, there was no distance left to close, just space to grow. What did you think of this story? Give it a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important to us. If you made it this far, comment chocolate. Only those who watched until the end will understand your message. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. For more inspiring stories, leave a like and share it with someone you care about.